Hi, my name is Pete Kolash, certified high performance coach and life strategist, and welcome back to training 2 of 3 on balanced growth. Specifically, avoid being out of balance and riding the ebb and flow roller coaster of high performance. So there's 2 focuses here. One is balance. You have success in one area of your life without balance in others, it paints an unpleasant picture and certainly something we're looking to avoid. And then the other focus is consistency and sustainability. It's a huge challenge for most people. Instead, they're riding more of that ebb and flow, up and down roller coaster, which is something else that we'd like to avoid. Now, as we talked about in training video number 1, the idea behind this training is that losers have goals. Winners have systems, right? If we plug into the goal, it may or may not produce progress for us. But if we plug into the system, it absolutely will. It's cause and effect and requires less willpower on our end, right? So the first thing I want to focus on is the consistency aspect and the sustainability, right? Why do so many people struggle when they're trying to create positive change? Why do they struggle with sustaining that? Why do they struggle with being consistent? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because they're relying on their willpower. And willpower is something that fades fast. Even if you're the most disciplined person in the world, your willpower is going to eventually fade. So instead, what I do and I teach all of my clients to do is instead of relying on willpower, we're going to build what's called a personal infrastructure, something that's very concrete, something that's very tangible, so that we have something to plug into, right? It doesn't rely on our willpower or how we feel that day, right? It's something that is concrete and is going to serve us regardless of how we feel. Now, I was talking with a good buddy of mine. He's in my mastermind group right around the new year. And he said, people around the new year are very overwhelmed because they're trying to pull a 180 in their lives, right? He said, you have people that haven't worked out in months, they're trying to work out. You have people that haven't read a book in years, they're trying to read books. And you have people that haven't eaten healthy their entire lives and they're trying to eat healthy. He said, as a result of trying to pull this 180, they feel very overwhelmed. And he went on to say, I feel like we're very fortunate, to people in our mastermind group, the 4 of us, because we're just making minor tweaks, minor changes, and minor adjustments. And while that sounds really simple, I absolutely loved it because it helps to emphasize the significance and the value of having a personal infrastructure. Instead of getting to that point in our lives, whether it's the new year or a new quarter or whenever, where we feel like we have to do this huge overhaul and this big revamp that is likely to fall short, we instead have a foundation. We have a personal infrastructure. So instead, we're just making minor tweaks, minor changes, and minor adjustments. Much more sustainable and allows us to be much more consistent. And more times than not, the infrastructure that someone is working with is either broken or non-existent, not them. Right? Now, the second idea about balance that I want to share with you before I unveil the system, the one system that will really yield greater balance and greater consistency, is this idea of balance, right? Now, I'm working with this gentleman here, who's a big-time real estate agent in Maryland, and he said, Pete, listen, I feel like I've gotten more value out of 3 sessions working with you than a year working with my business coach. And I don't share that with you to suggest that I'm some sort of magic man or that his business coach is no good. I share that with you because that is what's going on in society today. I see too much of. You have a lot of specialty coaches. You have business coaches and leadership coaches and health coaches and relationship coaches. And you name it, there's a coach for it. And while the ones who do well at what they do, they're good at what they do, they're focusing on parts that make up the whole. And what I found to be much more effective in creating balance and much more sustainable is when you can engage someone from the inside out and help them build that personal infrastructure, because what's going to happen is it's going to create a very positive ripple effect into all of the major areas of their lives. And so I want to show you the system, this idea of a personal infrastructure. There's 6 major pillars of this personal infrastructure that will help you not only to create more balanced growth, but will help you to sustain and be more consistent over time as well. So 6 pillars of this personal infrastructure. Pillar number 1 is awareness. In other words, where am I? How did I get here? And what exists in my life as a result? And I'm not asking you to peel back to your childhood. I'm just asking you to look at the last 6 to 12 months and really do some level of self-assessment and take inventory. in all of the major areas of your life, your mindset, your physical health, your spirituality, your relationships, your finances, your business, your lifestyle, your relation, so on and so forth. Where am I right now in this moment? How did I get here and what exists in my life as a result? If you are not supremely aware of where you're at right now, it's going to make it very difficult to get clear on where it is that you'd like to go to next. Right? So that first pillar is awareness. Again, think assessment. Think taking inventory to get clear on where you're at in this moment. The second pillar is clarity. So after you're clear on where you are, next you want to get clear and excited about where you desire to go. You want to have supreme detail and clarity about what it is that you want and where it is you desire to go. Because if I know nothing else, I know that if you don't know in great, compelling detail what it is that you want, you'll never have it. If you don't know in great, compelling detail where it is that you desire to go, you'll never get there. And most people cannot tell me in any level of detail across the board what it is that they want. Right? Your ideal scene 5 years from now, what does that look like? It's 5 years from now and everything has gone beyond imagination. What does that look like? Most people have no idea what that ideal scene looks like for them. And let me tell you something. You don't just stumble into ideal. If you don't know what your ideal scene looks like, the likelihood of you living into it is 0%. You don't stumble into ideal. Right? But just by bringing alive in great detail and clarity what that ideal scene looks like for you across the board, it puts you in the game. More than that, it gives you a sense of excitement and anticipation. Now, if pillar one is awareness, where am I? Pillar two is clarity, where do I want to go? It only makes sense that pillar three is, well, how do I get there? And that's strategic activity. In other words, eliminating the uncertainty that separates you from where you are and where it is that you desire to go. Right? Making sure that you're doing the appropriate preparation and planning before each year begins, before each quarter begins, before each month begins, before each week begins, and even before each day begins. You don't want there to be any increment of time where you are not clear and you've not established a plan for how you'd like to optimize that day or that week or that month, so on and so forth. If before my day begins, I've already identified what's going to make out an absolutely optimal day, well, then it gives me a chance to have an optimal day. But if I don't identify what that looks like, the likelihood of me having an optimal day is 0%. Pillar number 4 is connection. In other words, relationships. What I see is far too many people have relationships by default, meaning, a childhood friend or a family friend or a neighbor. And I'm not suggesting that we burn bridges or end relationships, right? But what I'm suggesting is our relationships are so significant, as we learned about in training video number 1, to our happiness and our high performance. So we have to be very intentional and very deliberate with who we're surrounding ourselves with. Pillar number 5 is psychology, right? In other words, your mindset. We want to make certain that we have an action plan to positively condition our minds, right? Most people just leave it to chance and they get hit by the punches of life and it weakens them and it sort of brings them to their knees in a certain sense. No, we must have an action plan to positively strengthen and condition our minds so that when the adversity comes, we're going to be much less likely to quit or give up. We're going to be more likely to persevere and be resilient. Okay, your level of psychology has gotten you to this exact level in your life right now, no more, no less. If you want to get to the next level in your life, in whatever area of your life, we must upgrade our psychology. We have to have an action plan to positively condition our minds and strengthen our minds. And then that 6th and final pillar is the idea of physiology. In other words, your health and energy. If I'm going to do anything consistently over a long period of time, I need to make sure that I have the appropriate health and energy to sustain my level of performance as I journey, right? And so this is not a maybe, it's a must. So when you look at these 6 pillars, right? Awareness. Now let's step back and look at this in its full context. This is my personal infrastructure. This is what I have built out to a T. This is what I help others build out to a T. But what you have here is you're clear on where it is that you are. You're clear and excited with where you desire to go. You've got the activity vehicles, the planning, the preparation necessary that's going to help you get there. You've got relationships that are in alignment with where it is that you want to go and what you want your life to be about. You have an action plan to positively strengthen and condition your mind, and you've got the health and energy to sustain your performance over time. So we're talking about in this training balance, and we're talking about consistency. Well, with balance, regardless if I'm speaking with an executive or a newbie, right, entry level, or a stay-at-home mom or a teacher, doesn't matter. If I help them build these 6 pillars, it's going to create a positive ripple effect into all of the different areas of their lives, right? And then the sustainability and consistency, instead of relying on my willpower, I want to make sure that I have this personal framework, this personal infrastructure built so that so long as I stay plugged into this, it's going to see to it that my trajectory, my rate of growth constantly improves, and that my consistency is going to be a heck of a lot higher than most. Okay, so again, plugging into the goal of greater balance or greater consistency may or may not produce progress. If I set the intention, say, hey, I want greater balance in my life, and that's my goal, or I want to be more consistent, well, it's good to have that intention. It's a noble intention. But if I plug into the system, right, of creating a personal infrastructure for myself, well, it takes out the uncertainty of whether or not I'll have balance or whether or not I'm likely to be more consistent. If I plug into the system, it'll absolutely produce progress. It's cause and effect. It's cause and effect and requires much less willpower on my end. Okay, so I want to encourage you in the next video, which I'm going to share with you tomorrow, we're going to be talking about accelerated growth, right? Training 3 of 3. In other words, the multiplier effect for progress and results. My number one priority when I'm working with anybody is to help them to accelerate their progress in the areas of their lives that are most meaningful to them. What I show you in training 3 of 3 is going to be that multiplier effect that's going to take your progress and results and exponentialize it. Okay, look out for that email tomorrow, and I will see you then.